All right, so my name is Courtney Fisher. I am the Assistant Director of the American Indian Foods Program. Um, our presentation today is how to get solid trade leads out of trade shows, and we will have a Q&A portion of the webinar after the presentation. So if you want to enter your questions in the chat box, we can answer them at the end of the presentation. I would like to introduce Quintin Gray, President and CEO of Q Gray and Associates, a consulting business that helps companies and organizations market food products around the world. He is the former agriculture counselor at the U.S. Consulate in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and former agricultural trade officer at the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where he advised U.S. companies on how to market their food products in the Middle East. Now, Quintin, let us know how to get solid leads out of trade shows.
Thank you so much, Courtney. As with the previous webinars, I want this webinar to be as practical and as useful as possible. First, I'm going to talk about trade shows in general, and then I'm going to explain what it means to have a U.S. Department of Agriculture endorsed show. And third, I'm going to recommend steps how your company can take to get the best trade leads before and even after and during a trade show. So first of all, you have to understand that trade shows or food trade shows are being hosted in countries around the world every year. When I was the agricultural trade officer or the agricultural attaché in Rabat, Morocco, the government of Morocco had a trade show for the country, a food trade show. The same in Tunisia, the same in all the other countries where I've served or the countries I've covered. So there are always food trade shows, but most of the time they are small, relatively speaking. They are shows that I would not recommend that you spend your money to go to be a part of that show. It'd be nice if you were in country, you can see the local producers, you can see the local processors, and you can get a feel for the agricultural situation in those countries. But in terms of trade leads and possibilities of doing business, those aren't the kind of shows you want to spend your money on. And so what USDA does every year with the agricultural attachés and counselors, and I'll define those positions in a minute. What they do is every year they ask the agricultural officers working overseas to make recommendations on the trade shows that they see. So for example, when I went to Seattle, Middle East, which is in Abu Dhabi, about 5 years ago, there was an AIF, American Indian Food delegation that came, and I got a chance to meet them, to talk to them, and to see their exhibit, et cetera, et cetera. So what I did as an officer at the time was I made a recommendation to Washington whether or not I thought the show was a good show for providing sales leads, whether or not the attendance was good, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so I would send in my recommendation. And for some of the larger shows, they would send in, Washington would send out an officer from the trade show office to visit the show and to also make recommendations. After all of the comments come in on the show, then Washington comes out with an official list of trade shows that the Department of Agriculture endorses. And so that's what you'll see now. Next, if I can get my slides to go. As all great programs do, this one just had a snafu. I can't advance my slides for some reason. Can you see, what can you see from your end, Courtney? Courtney?
So right now, I'm just seeing the first slide, but it's not advanced.
Yeah, I can't advance mine either. Maybe we need to restart this one. Let's see what's going on.
Perfect. Yep. I think it's advancing your slides now. So
Okay, yes. Okay, so we just got joined by Kenneth LeBeau. Do you want to start it over again, Courtney? I think we should.
sure. Yeah, I can definitely do that. So today, our presentation is how to get solid trade leads out of trade shows. And I'd like to introduce Quintin Gray, President and CEO of Q Gray and Associates, a consulting business that helps companies and organizations market food products around the world. He is the former agriculture counselor at the U.S. Consulate in Dubai, United Arab Emirates, and former agricultural trade officer at the U.S. Embassy in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, where he advised U.S. companies on how to market their food products in the Middle East. And now, Quintin, you can let us know how to get solid trade leads out of trade shows.
Thank you, Courtney. And like the previous webinars, I want to make this webinar as practical and useful as possible. First, I want to talk about trade shows in general. And then second, I want to talk about what's called the U.S. Department of Agriculture Endorsed show. And third, I want to talk about what you and your company should do before a trade show, during a trade show, and even after a trade show. First of all, I want you to know that any country in the world, almost every country in the world, has a food show. And most of the time it's an annual show where the producers, the farmers would come together, where the food processors would come together, where you would have equipment dealers, farm equipment dealers would come together. I've attended those shows in every country I've served. And I think in particular about one in Rabat, Morocco, and also one that was in Tunisia when I was out in that region. The shows were fine. They were good if you were there, and if you could make it, it would be a chance for you to connect with the agricultural people in the country. But in terms of making sales, in terms of being a show where you can market your products, I would not recommend those shows because they're not designed for that. They're designed for local folks in the food industry to get together. So when I was working as a U.S. diplomat, agricultural counselor, and agricultural trade officer, what I would do is I would go to those shows, and then I would actually send recommendations back to Washington as to whether or not this should be a show the U.S. Department of Agriculture should endorse. And then every year and for every show in the markets around the world, all of the folks who are in the Foreign Agricultural Service that work for the federal U.S. government, and whose job it is to actually relay information back to the U.S. agricultural sector. They make recommendations and they send those recommendations back to Washington. And that's what I did. And so with those recommendations, what Washington, did I lose my presentation this time? Oh my God, I can't believe it. We're having a few technical issues here. Courtney, can you see it at all?
Yeah, I can see the front screen. I don't know if you want to just log out and right back in again with the presentation. Not log out of Zoom, but back
Okay.
out of the presentation really quick.
Let me stop share and then go back into share again and get back into the presentation. This is weird. Share and go to slideshow beginning. And let's hope that we don't have another technical problem because we had a couple already today. So after all of the recommendations come in from around the world and different countries around the world where there are local trade shows, the trade show office at the Foreign Agricultural Service in Washington will take all the comments and recommend the shows that got the best recommendations, as in terms of show organization. Attendance is very important. And the most important numbers coming out of the trade show is how many on-site sales were made at the show, and then how many, the 12-month projection of sales that resulted from the show. I'll give you Gulf Food for an example. When I was in Gulf Food Show, and this first picture is about just what you'll see if you go to Gulf Food is exactly what you will see at the Gulf Food Show. It's the largest annual food show in the world. The last year when I was agriculture counselor in Dubai, the number of US companies was 182 companies exhibited at Gulf Food. US companies exhibited. Of that 182, the sales were, I think, 140 million. It was a very large number of sales made. And then the first year projections were like $500 million. It was really a lot of sales that were made on site and projected 12-month shows. So USDA takes all of that information and then it endorses shows. And so let's hope that my next slide comes. It does. Yes, technology works sometimes. So this is a list of the USDA endorsed shows for 2020. Now, Fruit Logistic Supermarket Trade Show, Gulf Food took place, BioFact, but then the coronavirus hit. And so as a result of that, a lot of the shows that should have taken place in March have been postponed, and one canceled, the one in Tokyo. But most of the shows that were supposed to take place between now and May or June the dates have been changed to the fall. So you see that VIV show Middle East is going to be changed to August, September, and the food show in Japan has been canceled, etc. So the COVID-19 virus is impacting everybody, and the trade shows in particular, and especially the trade shows. But what I want to point out is that there are trade show organizations, and I'm going to get into that a little bit later in my presentation about the different organizations. But I want to point out a few now. One is called CIAO, and I'm going to spell that out in a minute, and ANUGA. CIAO is in Paris, France, and it occurs every 2 years, and ANUGA is in Germany, Cologne, Germany, and that occurs every 2 years. They alternate. 1 year is CIAO, 1 year is ANUGA. The Gulf Food Show is the largest annual food show. And I talked about 182 exhibitors the last time, US exhibitors the last time I was there. But total exhibitors, the last year I managed to Gulf Food, the USA Pavilion at Gulf Food, was over 5,000 exhibitors. So you have, like this picture shows, this is just one little hall in Gulf Food. It's so massive, and I'm going to talk about how you as a company can position your product in such a situation, because it takes a little work. I advise companies all the time, especially when I was out there, don't just show up. You know, you have some work you need to do in advance. And you see, this is talking about the shows that are scheduled for later this year. And I'm hoping that Courtney and others will provide share these slides to the folks who have logged in. But CIAO Paris, and then you have Gulf Food Manufacturing in Dubai, Food and Hotel China. All those shows on this list, all the shows on this list are shows that Department of Agriculture staff has vetted, and we can say that this is a good show for you to make sales. These shows are well attended. The on-site sales have been significant, and also the 12-month projections in terms of sales have been significant as well. And this is just a repeat of what I said. Nearly every country in the world has a trade show, and you wouldn't want to go to all of them because that's all you do all year. And then USDA endorses. Endorsements means something to, in addition to just USDA saying, we stamp this with our seal of approval, it also means that there's some money that's involved. And that means the Department of Agriculture will pay for certain items, like for the USA Pavilion. It will provide some of the money to enhance the pavilion to make it better. Because there are a lot of countries that have pavilions at these trade shows, and some of them are just out of this world fancy. US government, not so much, because we rely on the exhibitors for the most part to pay for the exhibit, which means that we're not going to be competing against France, Sweden, and some of those other countries that the government's paying all of the costs of constructing the pavilion for the country. We don't do it that way. Sometimes it puts us at a disadvantage because it's hard for us to collect enough money from exhibitors in order to put up the world-class exhibit the US should be putting up. So that's an issue for politics, and I'm gonna stay out of that. Now, the main players in the trade show business, as far as you are concerned in your company and how you get to know who's who. First of all, you need to understand that the officers of agriculture, I'm going to give you some definition of terms too to make it simpler. There are agriculture counselors overseas that work for the Foreign Agricultural Service. There are agricultural attaches overseas. First of all, those two positions are basically the same. The difference is that the agriculture counselor is probably a little older and has more rank in terms of seniority. And so an attaché is the title that you get when you, I would say, recently came out of college, so to speak. You might not even be called that. You might be called an assistant agriculture attaché. Then you become an attaché. Then if you stay long enough and work hard enough, you become an agriculture counselor, which is a high-level position. And then the Foreign Agricultural Service has agricultural trade officers and agricultural trade offices. The agricultural trade officers are the same people as the counselors and attachés, but the post where they work is different. So an agricultural trade officer will probably work at a post that's primarily just transactional trade, trying to help a product get in, a product get out, versus an Office of Agricultural Affairs, where there may be some policy issues involved. The officer will be asked to actually do more diplomatic type work, serve what they call démarches and commands on the government. There are a lot of policy work in addition for an agricultural counselor or attaché, but when that same person serves at an agricultural trade office as an agricultural trade officer, the job changes a little bit, not much, but some. So when you see those terms, that's what they mean. Then we have what's called locally engaged staff. These are, I would say, the most important people in the whole overseas office for Department of Agriculture. The locally engaged staff are the local employees who are from the country for the most part. Like in Egypt, you'd have an Egyptian locally engaged staff person. But in the Middle East, it's a slight different because you're not going to see a Saudi working at the US Embassy. It's going to be someone who's coming from another country, like even Ethiopia or some other country who's going to work at the US. But they are still called locally engaged staff because they were hired off of the local market to work in the US Embassy. Those people are the most important because they carry the institutional knowledge about trade shows, about what products are coming into the country. Most of them work in the same country for 30 years or more until they retire. So if you establish a relationship with someone who is a locally engaged staff person, then that relationship could get you all kinds of information. They can tell you when a company is looking for a certain product. They can help you get through all the regulations of getting your product into that country, et cetera, et cetera. In order to contact them, you can go to the website that I've put up here, www.fas.usda.gov website. And then when you get inside that that link, you will go to countries and regions. And then let's say, for example, you wanted to find out, get an email to someone in the office in Dubai. You would click on United Arab Emirates, and then all of the contact information for that office will come up. You can contact them, and then they will put you in contact with the head of that office. And a particular office, in most cases, are regional. It's not just covering one country. For example, Dubai covers the United Arab Emirates, plus Kuwait, Qatar, and Oman. And so any questions you have about exporting food to any of those other countries are right there for them. They will answer those questions because that's what they are concerned with every day. Now, I want to talk a little bit about behind the scenes of a trade show. These are things that you won't see, but they take place. Whether you're talking about a trade show overseas or whether you're talking about one in the United States, there's a behind the scenes that goes on. So if you're thinking about, I'm talking mostly here about overseas trade shows, but if you take this a little further, everything I say could be reversed around and you're talking about a US trade show as well. They all apply. So in the trade show, there are groups of companies and organizations called trade show organizers. In Dubai, it's Dubai World Trade Center, and it runs the Gulf Food Show, plus all kinds of shows, wood show, you name it. There's a whole list of shows that Dubai World Trade Center runs. Arab Health. It's just what you call AgMe, Agriculture Middle East show. So in terms of agricultural shows in the Dubai World Trade Center, over the course of a year, there are about 5 to 7 major shows, at least 5 shows that are taking place in Dubai. Now, the next organization I want to talk about is called CIAL Paris, and it's French, Salon International de l'Alimentation. Okay, CIAL. That I just gave you a little bit of my French. But at any rate, CIAL is a big organization based in Paris. And it used to be that they would run the show in Paris every 2 years, but they expanded that show. And now they have CIAL China, they have CIAL Middle East, which is in Abu Dhabi. They have different shows that all run through the CIAL organization. And the next show I'm talking about is Anuga. Anuga and CIAL don't run at the same time. CIAL runs every 2 years, so that means in 2000, this year, there's supposed to be a CIAL Paris. And then 2021, there's supposed to be an Anuga show. And the German is, I'm not even going to try to pronounce the German. I wrote it down because I really didn't know what Anuga meant. And I wanted to look it up and find it out for myself. But Anuga is the same show in essence. It's a huge show, but it's every other year. So the only annual show of great magnitude, I mean, huge show every year is in Dubai. And it's very much an international show, equivalent to a certain degree to CIAL Paris and Anuga. A lot of US companies make sales in Dubai, whereas the sales numbers coming out of Paris for CIAL and coming out of Anuga, good, but probably not as great. So those are the trade show organizers. Those are the big ones. There are other smaller trade show organizations, and I'm not going to cover those here, but if you know these shows, these are the ones that are going to be garnering most of the attention. Then each trade show organization, they hire contractors, local contractors, either local or foreign. And those contractors help to sell the pavilion space for, let's say, the USA Pavilion at Gulf Food in Dubai. And they will sell that space as soon as the allocation, the organization makes allocation for space. The contractor who is contracted with the organizers will actually go out, take money from the exhibitors. And that for Go Food, at least up until the past year, had been extremely competitive. And it used to be that Go Food space would sell out in 24 hours at the time it was announced, because every company wants to get there. And I had conversations with the managers of the Dubai World Trade Center. I used to meet with them all the time. I used to be a pain in the neck because I was always trying to make certain that they gave us the best space at the show. And it was absolutely a fight every year to get the USA Pavilion put in a desirable location versus being put in the corner somewhere. Anyway, before I left, we had a preferable space. I don't know how long we were able to keep it though, because it's hard to keep great space. Now, your marketing team, this is extremely important that you know who can tell you about the trade shows. And of course, I put American Indian Foods, Quintin, Latasia, and then I further down the slide, which may be calling my technical problem because this is a pretty big slide in and of itself. I put down information for the Western United States Agricultural Trade Association. They also keep up with the trade shows around the world. And also I put down the contact information for the Office of Agricultural Trade in Dubai and the Agricultural Office of Trade in Saudi Arabia, just for additional information, examples. But you can go to the website and you'll find all that information on all the countries around the world. Now, these are the steps that you should take to get the most out of a trade show. Actually, your work needs to start way before the trade show. If you come in walking off the street and say, I'm going to a trade show to make sales, I'd be surprised if you'd be successful, because it takes work in order to position yourself. And the companies that are serious about doing business, they have already done their research. So I said about 2 months before the show, you can contact the Office of Agricultural Affairs that covers that particular show. For example, the Office of Agricultural Affairs in Dubai. Ask them to send you a list of the companies that are importing the products that you sell. They will have that list. I mean, my office gave them out 1,000 times, maybe not 1,000 times in a year, but at least every other day, we were sending that list out to people. And then what I also would recommend is that 3 to 4 weeks prior to the show, that you send the importers an email introducing yourself, your company, your product. And what I found out by working with these Middle East buyers is that they will tell you in 2 seconds whether they think your product will be successful with them. So you don't want to waste time. They don't want to waste your time. So, but let's say you're selling a product that they are interested in. So what happens is that in order to get the relationship stronger, and business is all about relationships, and it's about product, quality product. But even though there's quality product on the market, if the relationship is not good, you can forget it. So you want to be able to establish a relationship. So this is assuming you've already decided to attend the show. Then what you do is you say, let's have lunch or coffee. And you can have that time set up, time slot, where you're going to meet. If you're going to be an exhibitor, they can meet you at your exhibition space. But if not, what you'll find out at the show, which is my next, is the next thing is well, don't let me get to that. I want to get ahead of myself. But, oh, here it is. It's on this slide. You can also have meetings in a meeting lounge that's normally organized by the Office of Agricultural Affairs in the country. So there's a place for you to meet, even though that might be a little bit crowded. There's a place for you to meet. There's also normally free Wi-Fi. And then there's another thing I want to bring out, and I'm into now, the pre-show part, is most of the major trade shows, let's say Gulf Food, for example, they do one-on-one meetings. They organize one-on-one meetings. but you have to contact them in advance to give information about your company, give them a schedule of when you're going to be available during the show, and they can organize these meetings before you from their side. It's a service that they give. Now, I can't say that all of them are free around the world for different shows, but I know that Gulf Food, they pride themselves in their matchmaking of companies. But it's something that a lot of U.S. companies are not aware of, and that you will be aware because you're attending the webinar today. Okay. Oh, and another point, since I'm going reverse on this list, there is actually the Office of Agricultural Affairs, and I know at least in Dubai, they do this. Is they reserve block rooms in some of the best hotels in Dubai at the best rates, at reduced rates. So our office would go in, negotiate with the hotel. The negotiation is to get the hotel to charge the pre-approved embassy rate, which if you came in without the embassy rate, they're going to charge you an arm and a leg more. But the Office of Agricultural Affairs has already gone in and negotiated and blocked several hundred rooms in most cases, or even more. And we use our, the money, and we put a deposit down for the room. And then we also will hold that room for the exhibitors or for U.S. visitors that notify our office that they are coming. And so they don't have to pay the market rate. They can pay a reduced rate for the room. Now, let's go to what you will find at the show. During the show, I tell people this all the time, the serious buyers are going to come the first day. The first full day of the show, I'm not talking about the, perhaps not the day of the grand opening, because most of these shows open up around noontime, 11 o'clock or noon. And then you have a dignitary like the Minister of Agriculture or either some high official in the government, and maybe even the Crown Prince in some cases would come. And that is like an opening ceremony. That is not the day to do business, because on that day, it's going to be more or less, companies are going to be setting up for the show. You're going to have a big ceremony, TV, the press is going to be there, blah, blah, blah. I've done a million of them, so I know exactly what to expect. And so those openings, it's not the day for business. The day really for business is the day after that. That's when the serious buyers are going to come. And a lot of the shows will not open it up, the trade shows up to the public until those first few days of full business days could be done. During that time, if you're at Gulf Food, it's crazy, because there are going to be thousands of people running all over the place like ants. And of course, I don't know what coronavirus is how that's going to impact everything. But we have to see. Well, hopefully one day we'll get back to normal and we can have these kinds of big events again. But at any rate, the first full day is the day that you're going to have business done. Hopefully, if you listen to what I'm saying, you would have done your homework. You have already arranged your meetings with the major buyers, and then you will establish your relationship so that that first full day, you'll be ready to do business. The trade show contractors, normally, I know at Gulf Food, normally they would host a reception or dinner. And that will probably be about the third night of the trade show. And that is a show that dinner or reception, all of the major players involved in the food sector, the exhibitors, companies, etc., will come to that event. And most of the time, the U.S. ambassador will make remarks, or a high-level person from Department of Agriculture, such as either the secretary or undersecretary, will come to the event and give remarks. So it's a big event. Very well, you should make certain you attend it. And then another thing to keep in mind is most trade shows host food tastings and educational seminars. I think that a good way for you as a company to get your product noticed is to have some samples sent for tasting. And some of the best chefs in the Middle East come to the big trade shows, or I'm thinking Middle East, but in any country, in any region, the best shows in that particular market are going to come to those shows. And the important thing is that they get a chance to see how your product tastes, and they share this. It's all televised. It's like the big cooking shows in the United States. It's televised on the TV. They're talking. You normally would have maybe consul general or either ambassador would come there and put on an apron or whatever and cook. And I cook. I've done it myself. I made the best egg possible at the food show in Dubai. And then when I got home, I couldn't replicate it. So anyhow, but the point is that the show is a great place for you to show the world what you're producing. And most major trade shows have educational seminars for you to attend, like on food safety, food security, on market trends, regional trade issues. Those are very, very important for you to attend if you can find someone from your staff or someone from your organization who could go to some of those, because it takes place during the same time as the trade show itself. But those are the things you have to be aware of, and you have to not so much sign up in advance, but know that they are taking place. And then if you want to go to one of those, go to them. And they are very, very educational. They give you more information about the market than you would think. And now after the trade show, and this is where a lot of people miss out, there are two post reports. Post, when I say post, I mean after show reports. One, it comes out, let's say, you're still using Go Food as example. This is a report from 2019, and I'm pretty certain later this year, the report for 2020 will come out. But the show for 2019, this shows you how many visitors were at the show, how many countries participate, 182, the digital reach, floor enhancements, etc. Million square feet, 5,000 exhibitors, blah, blah, blah. And how many countries participated, and how many were international, and how many were from United Arab Emirates, etc. Now, this show, this is information that comes out, that's published by the Dubai World Trade Center. And this is a continuation of that report. The report is longer than this, and it's free on the internet. So all you have to do is Google Go Food 2019. You'll find the report. And it's basically presented in this format. So there are like 4 or 5 more info slides that you can click on. So you'll see that the kinds of exhibitors or the kinds of companies that exhibited at the show. You have the import or the trade of wholesalers, 35%, distributors, 15%, food service, 33%, retail supermarket, 12%. These are the buyers and the company's main activities. And then you have the purchasing responsibilities, and that you'll see that they are buying all kinds of products at Go Food Show. But these are just a percentage of the buyers of what they're looking for. And then the bottom are testimonials by people who are prominent in the food sector in that region, and the kinds of comments they're making about the Go Food Show. But then I wanted to talk a little bit about another report that you wouldn't see here, but you have access to. And that is a report that's put out by the Office of Agricultural Affairs after each major trade show. For example, shortly after Go Food Show, I would guarantee you a big headache is caused by the officer or the counselor is being pressured from the moment Go Food Show finishes to get a report out on the show. And the thing that most folks want to know immediately after show is what were the on-site sales, and also what are the 12-month projection of sales. And then they want that information more than anything. They want to know how well attended the show was, organizational issues, how well the show was organized, etc. That information is available for most shows, including GoFood, if you request it. So if you wanted information that comes from the Office of Agricultural Affairs after a major show, I would say a week or two after the show, they will probably have that information. And the reason why it takes a week or two is because everybody has a survey. And our office had a survey that we would give to the U.S. exhibitors, that we try to collect those surveys before the exhibitor goes back home. And so we are running around trying to get them to fill out these surveys, and they are so busy with meetings, etc., they don't want to. Sometimes we end up having to sort of chase after them after the show, and sometimes it's more than a week or two after. We're still trying to get the surveys back. So on the survey, we asked them, give us the number of their on-site sales. What are your 12-month projections? And with that, we actually report out. And that's how we form the basis for knowing which shows to endorse the next year based on previous year's sales. So with that said, this is all I wanted to say, but I'm ready to answer any questions you might have. You guys scare me when I don't hear any noise.
All right, so are there any questions at all? Well, I think we're finished up today, and thank you, Quintin, for presenting.
Okay. Well,
And Kenneth also says thanks for the info in the chat.
oh, thank you. Thank you so much. Well, if you have any questions, I left my contact information is here. And so I'm here to answer any questions you might have.